I'm your host, Chuck Lee, and I think we're on live now. And the master's running, right, Roy? Okay, great. Well, unfortunately, Fred, the true Stafford, is missing again, ladies and gentlemen. We don't know where he's at. We've got an all-points bulletin out for him. And if you see him in any snowbanks outside, or you see him along the river, tell him to go back home. We forgive him. All is forgotten, and we'll accept him back in. And first of all, we have to bring this Loyal Order of the Raccoons meeting to order. And so it's brought to order right now. So we are in business now, and hopefully we got everything wired here correctly. We had some technical difficulties at the beginning of the program, but as usual, we get them straightened out. And of course, tonight's program is brought to you by Flavin Pop, from the fine folks at Flavin Industries. Since 1896, the drink that builds strong bodies 12 ways. And of course, you can find it at only 2 places on earth. That little gas station down there on the corner of Ferry Street and Menominee, and at fine funeral homes everywhere. There you have it. Okay, so we are live, and we want to bring up some interesting information here about Cable Access Channel 11. Coming up November 2nd and 3rd, which is right around the corner. It's about less than 2 weeks away, Saturday and Sunday, is the annual Public Access Channel 11 annual auction. And boy, they have some good gifts this year. So if you want to bid on them, you'll have to stay tuned all day Saturday and all day Sunday. All the merchandise is contributed by area businesses. And for your auction guide, you can phone Public Access Channel 11 at 839-5067 to get a auction guide to tell you exactly what's going to be up for bid and when. Special items like 1 week for a family at Paradise Shores Resort, a 1-year family membership to the YMCA, symphony and theater tickets, fine art like paintings, and maybe even some sculptures, Green Bay Packers and other sports collectibles. I think some of them even have autographs of some of the Green Bay Packers on them. And fine apparel, children's toys, original furniture, and other wonderful items. So don't forget to tune in Saturday and Sunday, November 2nd and 3rd, 1996, to the 96th annual auction at Public Access Channel 11, right here. All right, well, we had plenty of news, and boy, oh boy, do we have a lot to talk about. And of course, once again, we have an all-points bulletin out for Fred the True Stafford. He hasn't been seen now since I don't know when. So if you see him out there along a riverbank or walking along a highway or down in one of the taverns on Water Street, let us know or find a ride for him to get him home. Fred, all is forgiven. You can go back home. Betty's not mad anymore. Okay, so we passed that along. Now, for those of you who are wondering about our set here, of course, Roy didn't show the full set yet tonight. Of course, I'm speaking about Roy Rogers Hoff. My engineer extraordinaire has been with me now for what, Roy? 25 years? Yeah, something like that. So you can see our beautiful new set here for the fall of '96 TV, for the TV sweeps here on television. And of course, we have a common man with us, and he's here in head only. By the miracle of TV, we're able to bring you the common man right here on this show, so there's no need to even watch him on his show. And then next to the common man, we have this picture here. Roy will have to bring the other camera up so you can see this one. This is Lorraine Lee, who is on the show from time to time. She's sitting right next to the common man. Now, Roy, are we going to have that set up so it's going to ring in there? Or in here? Because we had that problem on Fred's show, and it really takes away from the show there. So Roy will get that straightened out. There, Roy, it's ringing in there now. And hopefully, hello, are you on the air?
Yes.
All right. Have you called to say you've seen Fred or what?
Well, yeah, we missed Fred, but I'm actually calling about the common man. I think the guy's onto something. I just watched his show earlier. He's talking about a downtown racetrack, perhaps. Heck,
Roy,
you know, that's...
adjust that. Oh, you might have to turn down your sound there on your TV. We're getting a little feedback there. I was going to blame it on Roy there, but he's been with me for what now, Roy? 20, 30 years, so it wouldn't be him. Okay, you got it turned down there?
You bet.
All right.
What do you think? Downtown racetrack?
A downtown racetrack. Now, where are they going to put that at?
Well, the common man was talking about it. He had plans.
Common? What's this about a downtown racetrack?
And the arena team, Larry, he drew that up on a napkin, so the common man, he's got his plan. I think we should give them both a shot. Let the voters decide. Common man racetrack or Larry Wright Convention Center.
Well, maybe they can put that on the ballot then.
You bet.
Downtown racetrack, huh?
Downtown racetrack.
Never thought about that.
Be a Grand Prix sort of a thing. You could put a bubble over it and let them run.
Yeah, huh. Yeah, we'll have to give that some thought. Well, I'm glad you brought that up.
You bet. We'll see you now.
Okay,
it's a great show.
Okay, thanks for calling. All right, well, we had some unfortunate news from the local political scene. Cliff Chatterson, longtime political activist and civic leader and political leader in the area, died here in the last few days. And as you know, I've been plugging now for over 2 years to have the south end of the Eau Claire County Courthouse named the Cliff Chatterson Wing. So hopefully now in his passing they will go ahead and he was the chairman of the county board for several years here in Eau Claire. So possibly now they will push that through. They can no longer use me as an excuse to stop it from coming to fruition, because it would be a good idea to name it the Cliff Chatterson Wing. He was instrumental in helping it get built, and it was just dedicated here within the last year. And it's one thing good about it is they don't have any more room to build there. They've built all the way to the street on the south end and north end, and the east end is up against the street, and the west end is. So hopefully they're done building. So now we can name that wing the Cliff Chatterson Wing and get it over with. And speaking of the south end of the Eau Claire County courthouse, there's an article, there's a nice Leader Telegram on the B page of county falling caseload bodes well for W2. And it goes on to tell about how the caseload for AFDC and other forms of welfare in the county are dropping considerably. And the one thing I want to know is the staff dropping considerably. In other words, are the people that are making 30, 40, 50,000 a year down there to serve this dwindling AFDC and welfare caseload, is that staff being reduced in conjunction with the reduction in the caseload? Because you have, in our society, especially here in Eau Claire, you have a symbiotic relationship between the social workers and the case workers and the administrators running the welfare and the human services department, balanced against the people that are in need in welfare and AFDC and the other programs that serve the underprivileged in this area. So it's a symbiotic relationship. They both have to kind of stay in balance to keep it working, to keep the social workers and the union satisfied on this hand, and to keep the people on welfare on this hand. So when this starts dropping, isn't it just shouldn't it stand to reason that the number of workers that are sucking off the government tit, so to speak, doesn't it stand to reason that that should drop too, in correspondence with the drop in the welfare case? I just put that out for those of you out there who might have asked that same question. Are they going to reduce the staff now that the welfare caseload is being reduced nationwide and in particular statewide, thanks to Governor Thompson's reforms and fine legislators like Rob Krybeck and Dave Zien, who have helped reform welfare over the last few years. Now it's starting to show off in the reduction actually in caseload. So now it's time to start cutting the fat in these government budgets around the state. especially these county budgets with this bloated bureaucracy, which is basically kind of, they're barricaded behind the union that protects those particular workers. And hopefully now that they're going to have to give up some of those workers. You know, I was down there at the old farmer store building. We're going to take that call in a minute. I walked through it where the Health and Human Services was at for quite a few years, downtown Eau Claire. And anybody that's ever got food stamps or had to go in there to get a helping hand in a pinch or been out of work or needed welfare or whatever. And I walked through room after room after empty room after empty room after empty room where all these socialist workers were that were protected by the union and paid the bloated salaries by the Eau Claire County Board. And now, how are they going to continue to justify running that whole thing in the red with the reduction in the caseload? It's not going to add up anymore. They're going to have to start paying the piper and start cutting back. Go ahead, caller. You're on the air.
Hello?
Hello, is this Fred?
Yes. How are you?
Yes.
Good. This is JoJo Dance. I just wanted to see how you're doing this evening. Hello?
Hello? Yes, did you have a question for...
Yes, I was wondering what exactly is that on your head?
His head or mine?
Both.
Well, common man, he speaks for himself. Of course, he's a man of few words, and he's thinking about ending his show, so I invited him to lend us his head, and I said, well, you're going to have to get a haircut and keep your mouth shut. So he's on the show here now in lieu of having his own show, so he's a man of few words, except when he has a bright idea like a racetrack downtown. But other than that, this here is a genuine raccoon hat. There you go. You can see the tail there. That's actual raccoon for roadkill.
Respect.
My brother makes those up in northern Minnesota. He gets about $150, $200 a piece for those.
Is that up in Ely?
No, it's actually it's up around Grand Rapids, up on the edge of the taconite range up there, where they bring tons of taconite out of the ground and ship it through the Great Lakes. You know, you've heard the story of the Edmund Fitzgerald going down with, I think, 29 people aboard. That was loaded with taconite. But anyway, so that's a roadkill raccoon, and of course this is the Cow Report, and inside of the Cow Report we have the Loyal Order of the Raccoons. And if you see Fred, when you come down here for a tour of the public access studios here where we film this program, and Roy can show him the larger set there. Roy, if you want to give him the panoramic view of the studio here, Fred gives guided tours of this studio Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 to 5. I think it takes him about 20 minutes to make his way around the studio here, and he shows you the cow and the dole sign and the plants and all of the, he tells you about the stuffed animals and the brand new picture we have of Newt Gingrich to my left, and Dick Armey here to my right, and of course the hamburger signs and the picture of the cow down there and the picture of the other cow up here, and he tells you where they all came from and who donated them to the show and things of that nature. And his whole tour takes about a half hour to go around the room here and tell people about the whole public access studio where we film, and he shows you the cameras and the clock and the lighting and everything. So it's about a 30-minute tour, and Fred has those tours every 30 minutes, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right down here at the old Cow Report studio. And of course, we're housed here in the former Uniroyal building, where at one time 1,200 men and women came in here and worked to support 1,200 families out in the Eau Claire community until it collapsed and it was sold out to foreign interests. I think some French tire makers bought up parts of Uniroyal. Parts of the equipment were shipped off to China, and some was shipped to a plant down in Tennessee or somewhere. But they no longer make those thousands and thousands of Uni, Roy, and Al tires. And so the Cow Report studio now has taken over the whole Uniroyal building. And we use the whole studio here just to make this program, because it is a big program. All right, Roy, do we have a call, or can I get on to that other business? Okay, we got a call here. We better take that. And okay, we're going to have to, before we take that call, we want to remind you now, on Wednesday night, this Wednesday night, there's a meeting of, there we go, meeting of the group that is formed, and I guess they're licensed through the, or certified or registered down in Madison with the state as a political action committee to stop the arena. And I think it's stop overtaxation of the people, or stop the overtaxation of people. Anyway, I think it comes up to stop. But that group, which Lorraine Lee is involved in, and several other community leaders and businessmen are involved in the city of Eau Claire, to stop this $25 to $50 million white elephant arena from coming into Eau Claire, and possibly to discuss the subject of a recall election of the Eau Claire City Council. And that meeting will be held Wednesday night from 7 to whenever, probably from about 7 to 9 or 10, at the American Legion facility on Water Street. And that's this Wednesday night. If you'd like to appear, and you'll be able to get a ticket at the front, and they'll have a microphone set up, and you'll be able to air your grievances, pro and con on that issue, and discuss what can be done to stop it, because the other side is well organized, well lubricated with all kinds of money from insiders that plan to make thousands to millions off of building an arena, and they're working day and night on the other side, including members of the city council who could very well benefit from an arena. They're working. They have a committee that was formed quite a long time ago to bring in this arena. Recently in the Leader Telegram, there was a telephone poll to ask people whether they should continue with using taxpayers' money to do a final study, and only 16 people said yes, and I think it was over 100 said no. That sounds to me like there shouldn't even be a referendum, because when you put out a referendum and you hold it on a Saturday like the school board did, and you start deceiving people and telling them it's going to cost one thing, and then after you vote for it, the costs go up as much as 20 or 30% more than what you thought they were going to cost, and the propaganda starts rolling thick and heavy. This shouldn't even be brought to a referendum with less than 16% of the people in favor of it. The question should be, how many people on the city council should be called up for a recall in the spring of April of 1997 elections, not whether there should be an arena or not. And if perchance there is a referendum, binding referendum for or against the arena, it should ask, do you want, the question on the ballot should just specifically say, do you want to build a $25 or $30 million or $50 million arena or not? It should be an up or down question. It shouldn't be couched or a tricky question to where you think you're voting one way and you find out you voted another way. You got to be careful, because these shysters are very clever when it comes to these ballots, and they can word them in such a way that you think you're voting against an arena and you end up getting the thing because you voted the wrong way. So the question should be, should half or more of the city council members be on a recall, or should there be an arena? Maybe that ought to be on the ballot. So while you're chewing on that, we'll take our next call. And if anyone's seen Fred out there, and you see him sleeping on a park bench, or you see him down at one of those all-night movie theaters, or you see him hitchhiking out on I-94, go up to him and say, Fred, all is forgiven. Betty says you can come back home. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, howdy, how you doing tonight?
All right.
All right, my name is Josh, and I just wanted to know your opinion on the legalization of marijuana.
On the legalization of marijuana.
Yep.
In this country, or?
Oh, yeah, in this country, like United States, per se. Even Wisconsin, even Eau Claire is good.
Just legalizing it in Eau Claire?
Yeah, Eau Claire, Wisconsin, United States, I don't know. It's all the same.
Okay, the legalization of marijuana. Common, what do you think about that? I know Common's afraid to talk about that. Of course, I heard rumors that he smoked some back in high school and he's never been the same since. Is that true, Roy? Did Common smoke pot back in high school? Okay, just checking. I guess he said no. Anyway, recently in the news, the president's press secretary admitted that he smoked marijuana 20 years ago. And even more recently, Bob Dole's communications manager on his campaign was accused of not only smoking marijuana, but selling it during his college days about 20 years ago. There seems to be a pendulum that swings in this country from acceptance of marijuana to from one end to where it's accepted, like 20 to 25 years ago, it was really accepted, and then it kind of swung the other way to where now it's starting to be considered a very serious crime again, and people are getting 3, 5, 10 years in prison. And with the overcrowding in the prison system, it's no place to fill up the prisons with young men and women in their teens and early 20s because they made a mistake because of marijuana. There are bigger fish to fry out there. The methamphetamine drug scandal that's rampaging across this country. There's a heroin epidemic raging across this country, a cocaine epidemic. There's some very serious drugs out there that are causing all kinds of problems. And marijuana is one of the least problematic drugs that are out there that are still considered illegal. That's not to say that I'm for legalization of marijuana. I already think we have too many legal drugs that are causing multi-trillion-dollar problems in this country. Alcohol causes thousands of deaths on the highways, thousands of shooting deaths. Most people in prison say they were either on alcohol or cocaine or heroin when they committed their crimes. We have a very serious problem with alcohol in this country. We have millions of people addicted to alcohol. On the other hand, we have another very addictive drug called tobacco, which kills over 300,000 people a year. So there's no time to bring up another drug that is illegal and bring it up to the status of cigarettes and alcohol, make it legal, and so we have another problem to deal with. What we can do in the meantime is lessen the penalties on marijuana and realize that it has worked its way into the culture of the United States for the last 50 years. Back in the 1950s, people got 10, 15, 20 years to life for a handful of marijuana. Then the pendulum swung into the 60s where everyone was smoking it, 60s and 70s, and it was even legalized in states like Alaska for small amounts. Now the pendulum has started swinging the other way, and we're starting to fill up the prisons again with young men and women who are getting their lives ruined over the marijuana issue. So we need to look at lessening the penalties for it and looking for alternative ways of controlling it, but not legalizing it, but probably decriminalizing it to a certain extent, so that we're not ruining a whole class of people in this country because they got caught up in recreational drug use. But no, I'm not for legalizing it, to the caller. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, I certainly do not support the arena, proposed arena in Eau Claire, and what I'm wondering is if it's such a good deal, why isn't there a bunch of private investors that would go together and support that place, and they could make all the money on it?
Well, would you invest in it?
I'm a real estate broker, and no, I certainly would not invest in it.
I thought the mortgage brokers and the real estate brokers are just drooling to get this in here. Is that true or false?
No, actually, I don't need any higher real estate taxes.
So you're of the opinion, being a real estate broker, that in the end, when all the dust is settled, it's going to cost you more on your real estate property tax?
Absolutely. I would say it's going to be 2 and 3 times as much of a deficit as they predict, and there's not going to be enough tax on the room tax or any of the other taxes to make it up, and it's coming down to one thing, real estate tax, and everybody's going to take a hit.
You know, you think about it, them room taxes get too high and people just drive to Menominee to stay. They'll bypass Eau Claire. I mean, the room tax, you can get it up to 20%, and all of a sudden you're paying $50 just to sleep overnight in Eau Claire. They're going to maybe look at driving 20 miles.
That's true. People only pay so much, and what it's going to do is it's going to drive prices up on everything, and everybody's going to end up paying for it, and we pay too many taxes now.
Well, you know, one thing I figure that'll happen is they're going to lure the students. There's 10,000 college students here in town. They're going to lure them by baiting them into saying, well, no problem, you're a student. You'll only have to pay half price. We'll stick it to the taxpayers of Eau Claire. They can pay $20 for a ticket, but no, you're a student, you can only pay $10. That's what'll happen because it's already happening. You get a student rate, and everyone else pays another rate for tickets. So the townies, that's us folks here that pay taxes in Eau Claire on real estate and other things, us townies will have to foot the bill for the half-price tickets that they give to the students as a incentive for them to come on board and vote for the arena. But I'm of the opinion you are. I've dabbled in real estate, and I know that it's going to be put on the back of the people where it always is put, and that's on the back of the homeowners.
Yep.
They always figure it's just one more little piece of straw. It's not going to hurt anything. But you got people out there on fixed income that are only getting $400 or $500 a month Social Security, and they're struggling to stay in their own home. But their real estate taxes keep going up and up, and they're forced out of their own homes. And that's not the American dream. The American dream is to keep a person in their home, not force them out onto the streets or into a nursing home because they can't afford to stay in their own home.
That's true. We've got one council member down here that I think has that belief. But there's quite a few other ones that just are not listening to the people.
Of course they're not, because they're looking at, they attack people like Lorraine Lee and say she's against everything. Well, Lorraine Lee is one of those senior citizens that is on a fixed income, and she's struggling to stay in her homestead, in her own home, because she knows people that have called her that have had to go out and sell their wedding rings to get fuel oil for the winter or to pay the real estate tax. And it just keeps going up. We got a break from the school board. It was forced on them by the state.
Yep.
But so now we got the city, and we have the county board, and we have the Chippewa Valley Technical College looking at carving up that savings that was forced on the school board. They're looking to carve it up before it can even get to.
I agree with that. They will take the savings and they'll spend it. But I would like to see that if the county and the city could possibly come around with some ideas on how they're going to save us some money by making things more efficient rather than ways of always spending the extra money. They got to learn how to save it in different areas too and cut some fat.
You know, that sounds like a novel idea, doesn't it? It's something that doesn't seem to cross their mind because, see, a socialist, the only way they can keep their programs going is to keep feeding them, whether they work or not. And when you have a city council, it's kind of a socialist government. They feed off the taxpayer to keep their system from collapsing. And so to keep that flourishing, they keep hiring more people, they keep taxing more, and they have to keep building and keep adding on so that they can keep flourishing. So they only know one thing. They don't start every year with $0 in their budget. They start with a big bloated budget, and then they say they need more than the bloated budget from last year. So they add on to last year's bloated budget and make it bigger than ever, and thus they have to tax the people more to pay for that budget to keep the whole thing from collapsing. So I'm with you. I think there are only one or two down there at the city council that are thinking about ways of saving. Now, the county board, they set up a commission a few years ago, and they found something like 20 or 30 ways to save the taxpayers' money, and they've been whittling away at them, like selling off the landfill out there, and they're trying to sell off the center of care. They're looking for ways to cut. But this city council seems to be going the opposite way. You know, another thing is that arena, they say that it's going to take 500 and some people of good paying jobs to run this arena. If you think about it, they're running the whole city with about 500 people. Now, why does it take one building, 500 people, to run one building when the city of Eau Claire is using 500 people to do the street sweeping and the street repairs and recreation department and the sewage department and all that stuff is run with around 500 people? Why is it going to take 500 to run one building downtown?
Sounds like an inefficient operation to me.
And you know one of the main pushers of it is bucking for that $100,000 a year job to run it. There's going to be a director. They plan on paying him or her at least $100,000 a year to run this wonderful new arena they're trying to bring into town. So there's one person that's gung-ho to bring it in because he or she stands to get a $100,000 a year salary plus beautiful benefits. And of course it's going to be all those salaries are going to be on the city payroll, so that means all those extras like health insurance and clothing allowances and days off and 3-week vacations and 12 holidays a year. All that stuff is going to be added on the taxpayers' back too.
And if you know, if the private investors would pool their money together and build that place and run it, and if they went belly up, then I could see the city stepping in and maybe buying it for 50 cents on a dollar.
How about a dime on a dollar? That's what they had to do at the old Civic Center.
Well, that'd be all right too, yeah.
And you know, that guy's only paying $1,000 a month for that Civic Center here 5 years later. You talk about a bargain. You as a broker, and wouldn't you like to have that building for $1,000 a month rent and run events out of there? You could make your money back in a couple of days and the rest of it's gravy other month.
Yeah.
So for the last 5 or so years now, he's been paying $1,000 a month to the city. But if he wants to buy it, he only has to pay $100,000, and it's appraised at $1.1 million. So I can see the same thing happening to this white elephant on the river if it's ever built. The city have to sell it off 10 years from now. But of course, like I've been saying on this program, the banksters and the insiders, they're all going to make their money up front. It's front-loaded for them to line their pockets, and then they'll move on to another project.
I think the public has got to really pull together on this one and form a group to let that council know that they got to listen to the people.
Okay, that group
is going to be in there.
That group has been formed, and it's set up with the state of Wisconsin so they can raise funds to stop the arena and also look at recalls on the people that can be recalled. And that is the meeting that's coming up this Wednesday night at the American Legion Hall on Water Street. Starts at 7 o'clock, and they're looking for a good crowd and good turnout. They're going to have microphones set up, and you'll be able to get a little ticket at the front door if you want to speak, and just take turns voicing your opinions on this. And they're going to kick it around on what's the best way to go about to stop it. But I tell you one thing, you're going to have to be united, and you're going to have to put out a few bucks to stop it. You know, if you get 1,000 people that are willing to put $50 in a piece now, that's $50,000, and that might stop it. But you know, that $50 might be cheap compared to what you're going to pay over the next 20 or 30 years in more taxes to keep that thing afloat.
That's correct. I agree.
So
that's this Wednesday night.
Yep, this Wednesday night, 7 o'clock. I talked to Lorraine Lee briefly last week about it, and she says that the group has filed the papers with Madison so that they can do fundraising and do political action committee type work. And it's going to take that because the other side has been organized and steamrolling for over a year. And now the taxpayers are finally waking up and saying, man, we better do something or we're going to get stuck with another big one.
Who's going to win the presidency?
Well, I was going to get to that, and I'll let you go and I'll tell you who's going to win. Thanks for calling in, caller. We appreciate that. And I just had an article here that I got off the internet. Newt Gingrich, whose picture is over on Fred's side of the program there, and of course, you know, we're looking for Fred. If you see him laying out in the snowbank or underneath a eave of a building, raining, and there he's under there shaving and hasn't had a bath for 2 or 3 days, or if you see him down at one of the bars and he looks like he's over in a corner by himself drinking a beer, or if he's hanging around the American Legion, somebody go up to him and say, Fred, all is forgiven. Betty says you can come back home. Okay, to the answer to that fine gentleman's call, who's going to win the election? Well, Newt Gingrich says that Bob Dole is going to win by 4%. And he also says, here's what it says, Gingrich predicts GOP win. The elite media wants Bill Clinton to win more than anyone, according to House Speaker Newt Gingrich. But Gingrich predicted that the GOP nominee, Bob Dole, writing on the issue of tax cuts, would triumph over the president on November 5th. Gingrich praised Dole for getting into a rhythm that, frankly, is pretty good, but it took the campaign about a month to get into the rhythm. But the last 10 days to 2 weeks, you've really seen them begin to define the issues. Dole is for lower taxes, Clinton wants tax increases. That begins to make a difference. And I think Gingrich also says here somewhere in this article that the Republicans will maintain control of the House and the Senate. So there we have that. And Roy, did we get that call from Fred yet? Okay, so if anyone's seen Fred out there, another thing you could do is if he won't go home, go down to the funeral, one of the local funeral homes, and buy a bottle of Flavin Pop. Flavin Pop, Bill Strong Bodies, 12 Ways. And just give that bottle to Fred and tell him to drink it down, and he'll probably feel better and come out of his funk. He's in what they call a funk right now, and probably hasn't shaved for 2 or 3 days, and he's probably just kind of hanging around out there, disheveled clothes, and he hasn't changed his suit and tie for 3 or 4 days, and he's probably just pacing around out at one of the all-night hamburger stands or something, just wondering what he's going to do next. But Fred, it's starting to get cold out there, so you better go home. And if you're not going to go home, Fred, at least drink a bottle of Flavin Pop. It'll get you through the next few days till you come to your senses. Remember, Flavin Pop, Flavin Pop. I don't drink slop drink. Flavin Pop. Fred, it's the thinking man's drink. So get a bottle. All right, we'll take a call here, and then we'll get on to quickly to tell the ministers the do's and don'ts for pastors and churches in the upcoming election. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Yes, hi, my name is Ryan Gussy. First, I'd just like to comment on that beautiful singing. You've got a very nice voice. And I guess I just wanted to say that I have seen Fred.
You did?
Yes. Actually, today he came over and we took my tandem bicycle out for a little spin around the block.
All right, did you guys go spearfishing or anything afterwards?
Well, no.
Fred likes to fish for carp in the Eau Claire River, you know. He's a big carp fisherman.
Yes, see, actually, we took the seats off my bike, and we just spun around silly, up and down, back and forth.
Huh. Yeah, Fred's kind of like that once in a while. But remember, if you ever want to come down here, he'll show you how to make tires, or he'll just show you the studios here. We've taken over the whole Uniroyal building, and it's all part of the Kyle Report Studios now. And we've got over in the corner over there, we've got the tire making equipment. Fred will go through the whole process and show you how. Well, what he actually does is he starts with a rubber tree. We have one right there. And he goes from the rubber tree all the way to actually putting a tire on the vehicle itself at the end. He takes the raw rubber and he makes it into, they do that thing with rubber where they cure it, and then he actually makes a tire, and then he cools the tire down, and he actually will put it on your car while you wait. From rubber tree to tire, Fred Stafford will make you, and that's why his tours take so long, because he goes all the way through that process there, from rubber tree to actually putting the tire on your car. And you know, by doing that, Fred has cut down the cost dramatically of the cost of a tire, because he's cut out all the middlemen. Okay, go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, am I on the air?
Yes.
How many do you have left?
How many days?
No, hats. How many hats do you have left?
Which kind?
The raccoon hat you got.
Well, if you join the Loyal Order of the Raccoons, we have plenty of them.
Oh, I thought this was like Home Shopping Network, like they order some of the stuff I see up there on the table.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can always buy the Flavin Pop. We have plenty of that.
Shit, I'm a beer drinker.
Well, you know, nobody exactly knows what's in Flavin Pop.
What you got in there?
We don't know.
I used to drink a lot. used to drink a lot of them martinis when I was a young man.
Since 1896, they've been making.
I'm not that old.
It's kind of like the Coke formula. Nobody actually knows what is entirely in this. All they know is it's green.
Yeah, give me a little loopy, I think, though.
Yep.
My old days, I think that might give me a little too loopy and stuff.
Roy's getting you close up there. You can see my finger there, how well it's healed up that finger there that I cut.
Oh yeah, seems to have been. I also noticed that there's a pro sign in the back there. You might not have noticed it, but it's upside down.
Oh yeah, that's to let people know our unsolidarity for the Perot campaign and the parasites. Okay, thanks for calling in there, caller. We appreciate those, and from time to time we do have things for sale on the program, but other than Flavin' Pop, I don't want to block the Dole sign there. Got to remember November 5th to vote for Bob Dole. Okay, from the pew to the precinct, political do's and don'ts for pastors and churches. Now, don't be fooled by the Democratic National Committee and others saying that ministers cannot talk politics. What do you think they call it, the bully pulpit for? You can talk from the pulpit, and you can talk politics. If they silence the churches, then we will collapse into a National Socialist Nazi nation because they'll silence the ministers. Do you know during the American Revolutionary War, the ministers were the backbone of the revolution? They would preach on Sundays, and they would take off their robes, and they would go out and fight alongside the other men the rest of the week. And the pastors were used to pass the messages back and forth to the troops who were fighting the British. It was very vital. So we can't silence the ministers. And of course, the Democratic National Committee is trying to do that right now. They're trying to stop the Christian Coalition from distributing their millions of voter comparison, candidate comparison brochures that are passed out every election year. And it's a brochure about the size of this, but it'll compare the candidates, like it'll compare Bob Dole, Ross Perot, and Bill Clinton, and it'll just go through the issues, 10 or 15 issues, and it'll compare their stance on each issue. Well, the Democratic National Committee knows the power of that, and they know the power of the church votes, so they're trying to stifle that and to silence it this year. But from my contacts within the Christian Coalition, they're planning on distributing their several 30, 40 million of these around Election Day, and no matter what the government tries to say, because it is a freedom of speech and freedom of press issue. And so those will be distributed on time, as usual. Okay, Roy, we got another phone call there. Hopefully this will be the call that you've all been waiting for, and that's the call, the Find Fred call, to see if we've actually found Fred. There have been some sightings. Somebody saw him up north carp fishing on the Eau Claire River, or actually it was the Chippewa River, whichever one goes up north there. And they said they saw him lugging a 30-pound carp over his shoulder in one hand, and he had a can of Michelob in the other. And they said he had a big smile on his face, and he hadn't shaved in 3 or 4 days. Now that's just a rumor. Another rumor was somebody said they saw him down by Madison. But I don't know what he'd be doing down there. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Hi, how you doing?
All right.
I heard you say that. Oh, I haven't seen Fred either.
Oh, good.
Haven't seen him at all. I heard you say that Gingrich says that Dole will win by 4%.
Yeah, he says Dole's going to win by 4%, and they're going to maintain control of the House and Senate in Washington.
Do you believe that?
Well, I watched the daily tracking polls, and on one hand, you have the CNN, which is the Clinton News Network, saying that Clinton's ahead by 20 points. On the other hand, you have a group called the Zogby polling group, which says it's closer to 7 or 8 points. So you have to take the Clinton News Network with a grain of salt because, as you know, Ted Turner and Jane Fonda own that particular news source.
Yeah, but Gingrich hasn't been right about anything ever. Why should he be right about this?
Well, he was pretty right 2 years ago when they overthrew the Democratic House that had been Democratic for, what, 40 years? Since 1954?
Well, go back money will buy a lot of stuff, buy a lot of votes.
Yeah, and you know, 35, they're also saying that the unions, everywhere from the Teamsters Union to the AFL-CIO to the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, They have raised between $35 and $50 million that they've dumped into the lap of the Clinton administration to campaign with, and Newt Gingrich says that $35 to $50 million worth of union money has bought 35,000 ads that the Republican Party has not been able to counter. In other words, the Republican Party didn't have that $35 to $50 million of union money to counter those union ads. And also Hollywood has kicked in somewhere between $10 and $50 million of money to help the Clintonistas win. And so you have these special interests that have Hollywood, you know, they want Clinton to lay off them, and so that they can produce their trash for the American public. And of course the unions, they want that money still flowing out of government into the county courthouses, or not necessarily county courthouses, that would be county money, but there's a lot of federal employees out there that want that money to keep flowing into their pockets in the forms of paychecks. And of course the government flows money into the construction, into the union trades, and so it's kind of a deal where we'll keep feeding that money to the Democratic Party, and it's another symbiotic relationship there between the unions, the teachers union, and the other unions, and the welfare unions, which basically anybody that's on welfare is in the welfare union. And how that role goes is, I'll stay on the welfare plantation, I'll vote Democratic, you, the government, the Clintonistas, you keep giving me that welfare check and the food stamps and everything, you keep giving them to me, and I'll keep, in turn, I will pay you back for that by voting for you, so that I can stay where I'm at and you can stay where you're at. It's one of those balancing acts. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the trickle-down tax cuts. I mean, the tax cuts, yeah, they'll be cut at the federal level, and then it'll come to the state level, and then eventually it'll trickle down to the county and local level. And it's just Republican trickle-down economics.
Well, now, how is a 15% across-the-board tax cut that'll be cut right, 15% reduction that the government takes out of your paycheck, now how's that going to trickle down from the federal government to the state government to you? You're going to see it in your next paycheck.
I don't think so. It's just going to trickle.
You don't think so. You don't want to think so. That's what Bob Dole is saying. He's saying a 15% across-the-board tax cut, so that when you open up your paycheck, you're going to get 15% more. In other words, you're going to get the government is going to take 15% less, so you'll see that 15% added to your paycheck every week or 2 weeks or month whenever you get paid. So it doesn't matter about it going from the federal government to the state government to the local. It's going to be across the board. It's going to be taken right. You're going to see it right in your as soon as it's instituted. In 1997, when Bob Dole and the Republican Senate and the House pass it and Dole signs it, it's going to show up right on that first paycheck the day they sign it. The next paycheck after that, you're going to see an increase in your take-home pay, because the socialist government is not going to take as much. They won't be able to by law. They'll be able to take 15% less. So that is not trickle down. That is hard, cold cash in your pocket. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, I had a few comments and questions, actually, I'd like to make.
Did you just call?
No, I didn't.
All right, just checking.
Concerning the election coming up between Dole and Clinton, do you think it's safe to say that maybe Dole hasn't effectively marketed himself towards the American people? I mean, although the polls are always wrong, and many times they're not effective in gauging how the race is going, and I am a loyal Republican, but let's face it, Dole is behind in the polls, and the American people, for the most part, don't believe him.
Well, you know, only 55% of the American public votes. On one hand. On the other hand, in the last 2 years, they're expecting they're saying that 15 million people have registered to vote. It's the most people have registered to vote in a 2-year period in the over 200-year history of the United States. Over 15 million people have registered to vote in the last 2 years. But on the other hand, 2 years ago, only 55% of the people voted.
Exactly.
Now that means that 45% of the voting age people that are eligible to vote in this country do not even bother to vote. So when you take 43% of the 55 million, or the 55% that voted, you have what, about 30% of the people in this country put in President Clinton.
Correct.
So that's what's bad. Even in Europe, they've got around 70%, and under the old communist system, they had 80-90% of the people voting.
Well, they weren't actually voting by their own right, though.
Well, they were voting for the only person on the ballot.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true, and I can say too. I mean, in the last election, the third-party candidate Pro had a lot to do with Bush not getting reelected, and I think that's also going to be kind of a worry now because Pro does tend to drift some of the moderate conservatives and more conservative Democrats away from Bob Dole and towards Clinton or for Perot, and that hurts Dole in the end. And I think what people, I mean, the American people as a whole, need to wake up and realize that Bill Clinton and this Democratic regime are essentially, their pocketbooks are getting fat from our taxes, and it needs to come to a stop.
Well, yeah, there's been some stories of lavish meetings where, like, the Department of Health and Human Services out there in Washington will hold these multi-million-dollar lavish parties for theirself. For Hazel O'Leary will spend $5 million jetting around the world, and so see, the Democrats, when they come to town, they come to play. They were out of power for 12 years. So when they got to the White House, they had a lot of scores to settle, a lot of Republicans to fire,
Exactly.
and a lot of partying to do, and a lot of rip-offing to do. And so they didn't waste any time to start. They started in January of '93 when they went into power there, and they've been ripping off the American public ever since.
Well, that's what I don't understand about the American public is that time and time again they do surveys and people say they don't want to pay more taxes and they don't like the taxes they have now. But time and time again the Democrats raise taxes and people still reelect them.
By the way, bringing up tax raises, Bill Clinton in 1993 raised taxes the most in the history of the United States and one of the biggest,
Exactly.
or the biggest tax increase in the history of the world. So he, true to form, he is a tax and spend liberal, and of course he had dibs on that money that he raised the taxes in '93. He was going to hand that over to Hillary on a silver platter for her to use to run 1/7 of the nation's economy, which is the health care industry, and that was all dumped in Hillary's lap. And thankfully the whole thing collapsed. But they're talking about turning Hillary and Al Gore loose in the second administration.
Well, of course, if they do, I mean, and God willing they don't, but if they do win the election, they will be instituting all those pet projects that didn't have a chance to get them reelected to begin with.
Speaking of pet projects, there's one called AmeriCorps, where they hired thousands of cronies, Democratic cronies, daughters and sons, and they had them volunteer for the summer. Now, you think volunteering, you think about going out and doing something, Meals on Wheels, where you're doing something for free and you're helping somebody else less fortunate, or you're doing some kind of goodwill. You're volunteering your services. Well, these volunteers were paid $7 an hour.
Yeah. And all tax subsidized, I'm sure.
It was called AmeriCorps. It was. The whole thing was Clinton's AmeriCorps, or as Hitler called it, the young Nazi youth back in Germany during the 30s when Hitler built up his youth that would blindly follow him anywhere. Clinton is trying to do that with his AmeriCorps.
Yeah.
That's his Hitler Youth.
One small point, and I'll let you go. I just caught, when I turned on the TV, the part about as far as clergy bringing up politics in church. I'd just like to say I think I agree with that, but there is some danger involved, because I do firmly believe that there needs to be a strong separation of church and state, and although people need to vote based on their moral beliefs, they also need to look at the other picture as well and pick the candidate that's the best morally and has honesty and integrity. But they also have to pick the candidate that's going to be the best for the country and is going to lead us in the right direction into the 21st century.
Well, we really appreciate you bringing it up, and that's why it is important that Christians do exercise their right to vote. What Clinton wants the Christians to do is just go back into the church and close the doors and forget about it, and you be Christians and don't worry about voting us socialist Democrats will take care of all that government business. You just take care of the church business. But that's not the way you got to look at it. Not only do you go to church, but you also pay taxes in this country. And if you don't exercise your right to vote, one of these days they're going to be coming and knocking on the doors to that church, and they're going to line everybody up against the wall, and they're going to shoot you. You better exercise your right to vote, or you'll lose it, just like they did in the communist countries, where most of the priests and clergy were wiped out in Russia during the purges of the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s under Stalin and some of the other henchmen over there. And because that's one of the things that happens in countries where you don't vote to keep them free. You lose your freedoms, and one of the freedoms that you lose, two of the main freedoms that you lose right away are your freedom of religion and the freedom to keep and bear arms. Because you have to take away the guns in this country from people that want to remain free. You have to remove the guns before you can enslave them. And another thing is they want to enslave your minds by wiping out all vestiges of religion. And they tried that in places like Albania and Russia to the point where people had never even heard the word Jesus. And so now there's massive revivals going on in those former communist countries. And even with the threat of death in China, there's a blossoming Christian church with millions of believers that are secretly meeting in house churches. And of course, if they're found out, they're either executed or put in prison for many years. And I think we have time for a couple more calls. And old Roy Rogers Hoff says there's another call on line 36, so we'll take that one right now. Go ahead, caller. You're on the air.
Hello.
Hello.
I had some flip up the other day. I was on the ceramic balls for weeks. I cannot sleep anymore. I have to have a bedpan. I have drank too much flavor pop.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And you know, that's one of the reasons why they sell it at funeral homes, because you're near the source then. If you happen to drink too much and you die, you're right there. You don't have to go anywhere. That's why in the lobbies of funeral homes you can go up and you can drink it there, and they'll let you sit there all day and talk about funerals and drink Flavin' Pop. Because they know if you keel over dead in a doornail, they can just throw you in the box and have another funeral, which draws more people in to drink more Flavin' Pop, which causes more people to fall over dead, which causes more funerals. So you see, it's one of those symbiotic things where it feeds off itself. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Yes, I was just wondering, what is that gentleman's name sitting to the right of you?
Which right?
To your right.
This way?
Right. You're pointing right at his forehead.
That's Common.
That's Common.
Yeah, he loaned us his head because he's not going to do his show anymore. So through the miracle of TV, he said we could borrow his head for my show, just to kind of remind you of the old common man.
So does he give you his thoughts and theories on politics?
Well, you can see him thinking there right now. He's a deep thinker. He's the one that came up with a downtown racetrack.
He is.
In lieu of a downtown arena.
Wow. And now one important question. Who's going to win the Super Bowl?
The Super Bowl is going to be won by the Green Bay Packers.
All right.
And, of course, you know they're going to have to get through San Francisco to do it, to get to the Super Bowl, because they're both on the same side of the playoffs.
Well, they've already proven they can do that.
So I don't know who. I still haven't thought about it, but I don't know who's going to be on the other side to play the Packers, but they're probably going to get stomped.
Oh, come on.
No, the Packers are going to stomp the other team.
Right.
And where's the Super Bowl being held this year?
New Orleans, I believe.
New Orleans. I was hoping it'd be held here at the old Uniroyal factory, and that way you could come down and watch the game, and Fred could take you on a tour, and he could build you a set of tires while you're here, and he'd actually even install them, and might even hand out a couple bottles of Flavin' Pop. Okay, Roy, we better take that last call, and then we gotta get down the old trail. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air. You're the final call of the night.
Yeah, I finally got in. Doing a little spying on the enemy camp. Did you know that Clinton headquarters is only about 4?
And there you have it. Well, we want to thank you for tuning in tonight, and of course, I've been your host, Chuck Lee, and I've been with you now for what, Roy, 25 years? Yeah, something like that. Of course, I'm speaking of Roy Rogers Hoff. who has relatives on one side related to Trigger, and on the other side, Hopalong Cassidy, and on the other side, Geronimo. So it's one of those things where you have to figure it out. And of course, if you want to write a letter to us on email, it's cows@discover-net.net. And caller, are you there?
Yeah. Yeah, I am. Where's Fred?
We're looking for Fred, and if anyone sees Fred, write us a letter on the old cows@discover-net.net. And we want to thank you for tuning in. We'll see you right here on the old Cow Report 2 weeks from tonight, or I think it's the first Monday of next month. And of course, we want to thank you very much. Adios, amigos, and amigas. And of course, this meeting of the Loyal Order of the Raccoons is now over.